Hello again. Some societies are ruled by religious dogma, for example, Catholicism or Muslim fundamentalism. Others, such as China and Cuba, are governed by political dogma. In Britain and the United States, we pride ourselves on being pragmatists who are free to think for ourselves, and yet we are every bit as much in the grip of an irrational belief system as Iran or North Korea. It is just that this is never named, or indeed even spoken of out loud. It's part of the background, the fabric of our two countries. This is the firmly held view, regardless of any evidence to the contrary, that there are no differences between white, black, and Asian people, and that any advantages which they enjoy or disadvantages which militate against their advancement are entirely a product of their environment. This perspective is inextricably linked with the theory that race is no more than a social construct, with no external and scientific validity. The popular book on critical race theory sets out the case succinctly. I quote, people with common origins share certain physical traits, of course, such as skin colour, physique, and hair texture, but these constitute only an extremely small portion of their genetic endowment, are dwarfed by what we have in common and have little or nothing to do with distinctly human higher order traits, such as personality, intelligence, and moral behaviour. That society frequently chooses to ignore these scientific truths, creates races, and endows them with pseudo permanent characteristics is of great interest to critical race theory. I quote here from the 2017 edition of Critical Race Theory and Introduction by Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanich. This set of beliefs was described 60 years ago by the former chair of Columbia University's psychology department as the equalitarian dogma. Already, when Garrett wrote about what he called a dogma, these views had imperceptibly become the accepted, and indeed acceptable, way of viewing the world, at least by those with any desire to be thought progressive and liberal. This is despite the fact that the evidence supporting the idea behind the equalitarian dogma is sparse and some would say practically non-existent. It is not a scientific belief. What has happened now is that views of race and ethnicity are no longer framed in terms of being correct or incorrect, true or false, backed by evidence as opposed to speculative, and all the other usual ways in which we traditionally distinguish between sound and faulty ideas. Opinions now are divided up on ethical and political grounds. Those who feel it possible that there are real and measurable differences between black people and white, other than the visible and external ones of skin colour, are dismissed as right-wing and quite possibly racist. This word no longer has various shades of meaning. It now means somebody who probably supports apartheid, segregated schools, discrimination in housing and education, and quite possibly approves of lynching people. That this word could simply be a neutral descriptor, signifying a person who thinks that differences might exist, is inconceivable to many people in the modern world. It means now only someone who wishes to act on those differences and is likely to exhibit racial prejudice. That the equalitarian dogma is strongly associated with left-wing politics is, of course, natural and indeed inevitable. If once we grant the premise that all humans of whatever origin and ethnicity are endowed with similar intellectual ability, and that there are no inherent differences in any group as regards to temperament and behaviour, then it follows as a matter of course that any differences in that life outcomes of one group or another must be due to the shortcomings or defects of the society in which they live. If we find that black people are more likely to end up in American or British prisons than their white neighbours, or if they do less well in school examinations, then this is because of things like poverty and racism. If only we change society and make it more just and equitable for all, then these aberrations will automatically correct themselves. This was, of course, what was supposed to happen educationally with the desegregation of American schools in the 1950s and 1960s. Once black pupils had identical educational opportunities to white pupils and those of Asian origin, then of course they would do just as well as anybody else. When this failed to happen, the blame was laid on other aspects of societal inequality, such as income, health, housing, and so on. This is why left-wing political ideas tie in so easily with the doctrine of equalitarianism. To make sure that everybody, black and white, really does have equal opportunities, then it will be necessary to revolutionise not only the educational system, but to restructure society as a whole. It is only by moving towards a state of affairs where no citizen has more wealth than another that the disadvantages facing black people can really be dealt with. As long as black children are being raised in poorer and more cramped homes, living cheek by jowl with drug dealers and gangs, then of course they might drift into that life rather than striving to go to Harvard or Oxford. All these things are manifestations of both a flawed society and imperfect political system. When we see something like the Black Lives Matter movement, it will come as no surprise that looking more closely at what is actually being demanded, we find that it is the dismantling of traditional society and its replacement by a Marxist utopia, where there will be no police and every man will be a king. Sometimes quite well-meaning white people who wish to be seen as allies of black people do not altogether realise what is being proposed, and so find themselves in the position of what are sometimes described as useful idiots. Nevertheless, these useful idiots now comprise a large part, perhaps a majority, of people running universities and dictating policy in Britain and the United States. This is why the equalitarian dogma is chiefly promoted by left-wing types. It is a dogma because there is little or no evidence to support this spurious notion of equality. One must take it on faith and not ask any awkward questions. Indeed, the very act of asking questions, as I so often do here, is sufficient to reveal one as an enemy of progressive people everywhere and somebody who is quite possibly fascist.